Hello, I'm Bob Roller, Athletic Director at Campbell University, and we're here today for another edition of Athletic Director U. I have with me today Mark Wharton, the newly named Athletic Director at University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, and Simon Gray from Niagara University. So we're here today to talk about some human resources parts of our business, particularly some of the unfortunate part of hiring and firing, and sometimes firing. So we'll start with Simon. Welcome.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. I'm just curious to know, in your role as athletic director, in terms of the human resources factor, how many people do you usually have to bring into the mix when you are trying to discuss a termination?
Well, I like to be collaborative in most of my decision making when it comes to the job, particularly when personnel are involved. And so I want to get buy-in from several areas of campus, particularly in some of the more prominent head coaching roles or staff roles, really. Mm-hmm. But human resources has been an invaluable partner for me in my career and throughout my experiences of not always terminating, right, but working with coaches to improve their performance maybe. And sometimes it ends up in a termination, but sometimes we're able to improve.
Right, right. And Mark, in your role at many Power 5 institutions and now at a school in the Southern Conference, how do you approach the fact that you know that there's the possibility that a termination is on its way for a head coach and the way that you begin to formulate a plan?
Well, I think, with any employee, head coach or not, it's a process. It's a forever evaluating, getting them bought in on goals and objectives. I'm a real eliminate excuse type of situation that, through the ongoing monthly conversations you have with coaches or employees, you find out what they need and what we can provide, and continue to get them to buy into that message and that vision of where we need to go. And if it gets to a point, we'd like to rehabilitate them or provide him, like we talked about, resources. Mm-hmm. But if it gets to the end of the day, I feel very comfortable based on my past. They know where we need to go, whether it's a termination or accepting the change.
Right.
And so it's over communicating. Again, I agree with Simon, to involve human resources or many people in the process, that it's not a me versus them or an emotional type of situation, because it can't be.
One thing you hear in our profession is a lot of athletic directors will say, well, we'll talk at the end of the season. We always wait till the end of the season, which is always a good production. But in terms of the annual review, as opposed to throughout the year, do you have a plan where you speak with coaches throughout the year where they know where they stand?
Yeah, the annual review I think is very important, to have that as a metric, as a data point, and to set goals really at the beginning of the year. It's a nice way to work with the coaches. In our department, we're structured. We have sport administrators who oversee certain sports. I oversee a couple sports as well. But I like to meet with our administrators as well before the season so that we can make sure the administrator and myself are on the same page as we're going to the head coach to talk with them about what their goals and what our expectations are for that year. So I think it starts there. That's where the year starts. But to wait till the end of the year, in my opinion, is a mistake because you can miss a lot. And sometimes you can let something small grow into something much bigger. So I think it's important, and I know Mark's the same way, to have that open dialogue from what you said, and to be able to head things off at the pass or work with the administrator who's over that sport to try to deal with things right away. But the end of the year evaluation, I think, is also very important because it does give you the wrap around the 360 evaluation.
Mark, how do you feel in terms of throughout the season? If you kind of know that there's potentially a bad year on the horizon, what's the best way to handle that?
Well, again, echoing what Simon said, we have a lot of new coaches at Chattanooga where I'm involved in recruiting. I'm involved in a lot of the student athlete day to day. Just number one, to show the coach that it's meaningful to me and for me to support them, and I think we've done that there. But it's a process, and to be able to talk and continue to open dialogue about where our vision is, what our expectations are. And again, same as Simon, a lot of schools around the country, we have sport administrators that oversee all our sports, and be able to sit down with them, not necessarily before the season, but ongoing monthly, to evaluate where we need to go and get a lot of input and feedback from outside and inside. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's our sport administrator and a small group that has to evaluate.
Simon, one question that many people don't think about from an athletic director's chair is how difficult this is when you get to to know these people. Oftentimes you hired them, sometimes you didn't. But I don't know if you could sort of talk people through the process of what goes through an athletic director's mind when that bad day comes.
And Bob, there's a lot of fun things about our job, and there are a lot of unfun things about our job. And when you're working with coaches, even having uncomfortable conversations of corrective action, you know, that's where it starts, the process that you were speaking of earlier. That's where it starts, just to have those conversations to begin with. But then, you know, once the decision is made and the termination is going to happen, that's a very difficult day because we're so personally invested in our job and in our institutions, and we know that the head coaches are as well. I mean, they're spending an enormous amount of time away from their family, sacrificing from their family to do the best job that they can. At least that's what they should be doing anyway. And so, you know, it takes a lot of people into account. It's not just the head coach, it's their family. Oftentimes it's the assistant coach and their family who are affected, people in the community, alums, that sort of thing. And so it's never something that is a quick decision, right? There's a lot of deliberation, a lot of thought that goes into it. But those are tough days, for sure.
Right. Mark, for the three of us in this room at the moment, we're at what are labeled mid-major universities. How do you like to structure a contract for a coach going forward, both in the area of either a buyout, as they may be looking to move, or in terms of the number of years?
Well, I look at buyouts, you know, mid-majors are the ones that get picked over, and I know Chattanooga's got a history of that, especially in basketball, that, you know, you need to make it realistic, and we all have limited resources as far as what their total compensations are. But again, you know, I like a lot of schools have gone, if they do either get terminated or they move on. Speaking of moving on, is whatever school, they've obviously made us better, so they're going to a different institution, is be able to get a gain. As far as buyouts, make it very, very difficult for a school to come get them, whether it's double their compensation in the first 3 years and then tier it down. Obviously, the second contract's a little different, but to make it difficult. But again, talking about Simon, you're dealing with people with families that, again, my mantra is, again, making a great place to work, that they have great support, eliminate excuses, and provide them the opportunity to succeed, and it's up to them.
Right.
And again, don't lack in communication.
Some people, Bob, I'm sorry,
Sure.
just, you know, some people in our business will say people fire themselves, you know, and I think sometimes that's true. There are people who will make egregious mistakes or will make something that it's just a no-brainer. I mean, the decision is made. But then there are people who really are working as hard as they can work, and they're trying to do the best that they can, and it's just not panning out. And those are the really tough ones.
Exactly.
Legally now, as we head into 2018, it's
Yeah.
such a big word in our profession. So do you have to work with the university council as well as HR as you're going through this process of hiring or firing?
I do, and I always have. You know, I think why not start there from the very beginning. So when we talked about collaboration earlier, we were specifically speaking about human resources, but University Legal has been a great partner for me, a great resource for me throughout my career, as well as other areas on campus. I mean, you can't forget the student factor. So having your Dean of Students or Vice President for Student Affairs, whatever the position is, having them at least involved in what's happening in case there is fallout afterwards from the student perspective is important.
Right.
I echoed the same thing, but really bringing the chancellor or president of that institution as far as the interview process and letting him buy in. You know, we are a part of an institution. We're not a singular, isolated piece of it. So, you know, to find out what's in the best interest, the values that align with the institution, it's all very, very important. And again, to involve legal, human resources, and campus entities that help make the decision. I think at the end of the day, we get paid what we get paid to make some difficult decisions or take risk. And all hiring is a risk.
Right. We've all been at many institutions and have stories to tell, to be sitting in these chairs, and I would love to know someone or that's given you the best piece of advice in this area, or that you followed or watched as an example along your path.
You want to take that one first?
I've been blessed to work with a lot of great athletic directors, other administrators that have done great things, from Jerry Koloski, who's now at Albany, but had all those years at UNLV in the TARC era, to, you know, Mike Hamrick has hired some good basketball coaches that I've really leaned on advice and seen what they've done. and also mistakes that they have made. But I think, you know, with anything, you look at leadership and the pros and cons of what you would do when you sit in the chair, and a combination of all of it. Because, you know, I'm going to fail, and we all are going to fail, but we're going to learn from it. And again, you know, there's a lot of pressure on hiring as well as firing coaches, and there's a lot of examples out there that the athletic director's legacy is tied to all that.
And similar to what we talked about earlier, you know, one of the pieces of advice that I got that I find very helpful is you can't fire somebody for expectations that you didn't clearly state to them. And so on the front end, to be able to lay out what your expectations are and then know that they didn't meet them, you know, and I think people will understand better. They still may not agree with the decision, but at least at that point there's a clear set of, you know, documentation or a path that's been put forward for those expectations. So that was, someone told me that very early. You can't hold someone accountable for expectations that you haven't laid in front of them.
When we were cutting a student athlete one time, I was told it's not your fault that that person got a scholarship. It's not their fault either. So it's the same way in termination.
Right.
Well, thank you all very much. I want to thank Mark Wharton and Simon Gray for this edition of Athletic Director U.